Hi, this is Caleb Cain, and you're watching Cain Course Witness. In our last video, we discussed nationalism and the effects it started to have on Europe in the midst of the Industrial Revolution during the 1800s. Today, we want to talk about what happens when a country truly is nationalism, what those effects of it have. And to get you thinking about that, I want you to think of the classic Disney Pixar movie Finding Nemo. It's very famous for a lot of different reasons, but there's a lot of lines that have been quoted a long time from that. And one of them has to do with our favorite fish, Dory. Dory very often says the phrase, "just keep swimming." And there's a scene at the end of Finding Nemo when all of the fish are stuck in a net from a fisherman, and they're being pulled up together up to this boat. And as that happens, Nemo and the other fish encourage these very similar large fish, I think they're supposed to be tuna, to swim down and to just keep swimming. And eventually the weight of all those fish releases the net and allows their freedom. And that's really what nationalism brings together. When a country really cares about itself and is unified in that way, it continues to keep on swimming and pushing forward through many different situations that take place. And today we're going to look at some examples of countries that just keep swimming in order to survive using their nationalist ideas. Remember, as we discussed in our last video, nationalism is the belief that the interests of a certain country are the most important thing that should be emphasized above all else. Basically put, my country's better than yours because I live there. And it really is that rationale that has dominated Europe at this time and has caused revolutions and has brought in all these new countries that are vying for the same things. And one of the places in Europe where we see this nationalist conflict start to happen is in what is today Greece, or we call this region the Balkans. You may remember the Dardanelles. This was an important water route because it connected the Aegean Sea and the Mediterranean Sea back to Constantinople. And it was a very valuable route because it connected Asia and Europe. And it's at different points in history, it's belonged to different people. And during this time, there's multiple people that believe they deserve it, including the Ottoman Empire, including Greece and Turkey and even Russia. And because of that, a war takes place called the Crimean War. Russia in particular believed that the Dardanelles belonged to them, so they invaded it. And a lot of countries didn't approve of this, especially the Ottoman Empire, so they involved the British with them as well. And what resulted was what we called the Crimean War. It was a war that was very bloody and poorly fought because we are in a time of technological change. Remember, the Industrial Revolution is giving us more machines and different types of weaponry and mass-produced weaponry that people haven't really figured out how to use that yet. We're transitioning from using swords and spears and cavalry and cannons to now using guns. And because of that, a lot of people get caught in the open fields and get mowed down by guns. What really ends up happening is the fact that Russia was teamed up on by England and the Ottoman Empire. This really humiliates Russia, and it shows that there is, again, a change in power in Europe. Remember, the old orders, Russia being one of them, the old Romanov monarchy, are beginning to fall apart because different groups of people who have embraced nationalism and have started to come together in this way don't want to be ruled in the ways in which they have before. We're transitioning to more democratic styles that involve voting and democracy and other types of democratic ideals. That's becoming more popular as nationalism spreads, and the Crimean War is just one example of that. Nationalism is also often considered to be a major unifying factor in bringing new countries together. And one such country is one that we definitely recognize, but it is actually a relatively new thing historically, and that's Germany. Remember, there has never been a true Germany. There's been a collection of states that speak German, but there hasn't been a true Germany. The closest thing we ever had was the Holy Roman Empire, which at its height involved everything colored in here. But now it's just a bunch of individual states like Prussia and Bavaria and Hanover and all these smaller states that all happen to speak German, but they're not unified under one rule. Now, we discussed yesterday that the Frankfurt Assembly attempted to create a unified Germany, but Frederick the Great felt like that was too much power and it was a bad idea and rejected the crown, which caused this dream of German unification to go by the wayside and to have to wait for a little bit. But there are two individuals who specifically wanted that to happen. They are Otto von Bismarck and Wilhelm I. Wilhelm I believed that he should be the first ruler of Germany. He was the royalty factor. But the guy behind the guy is Otto von Bismarck. He's sort of the person who puts all of this into action. And he believed that a unified Germany was possible. In fact, a unified Germany could be strong. It could be something that would be recognized worldwide, really be a power in Europe, and that there was opportunity there. So he puts into practice a bunch of different movements that try to unify these states. One of them is to build a massive military. Prussia, a country we've talked about for a while, where Otto von Bismarck was from, had traditionally had one of the strongest militaries in Europe. And by unifying all these states together under one military, Germany, what would be Germany, posed a threat to the rest of the world. It was dominant militaristically. On top of that, Bismarck believed in something called realpolitik. It's a German word that basically means real politics, or teaching things and going about government the way it should be, in a realistic, upfront way. By having this window of transparency, he believed that people would embrace the goals of the German Empire, and that the goals of the new German government would be for the people. And much like we've talked about with other aspects of nationalism, this is important in unifying people together under one common goal. On top of that, Bismarck believed that invading nearby countries of similar German descent or of threats to Germany would expand Germany's new reign and create it in a militaristic and taking fashion. And by doing that, he invades Austria and will also attack France in the Franco-Prussian War. And by now, Bismarck has gone through most of Northern Europe and added a large chunk of territory to Germany's claim. And now Germany is truly an empire. In fact, we call it the Second Empire of Germany, in reference back to the Holy Roman Empire. And the first ruler will be Wilhelm I, who becomes known as the Kaiser, okay, which is German for king or Caesar. And it's referenced back to that Roman idea, that idea actually of Charlemagne, which we'll unpack more in a little bit. But Bismarck overall believed that the reason why Germany was able to come together was through a combination of blood and iron, military and industrialism. If Germany was able to be an industrial power, it would have the economy necessary to be one of these big nations like a Britain or a France. And if it had the military side of things too, it would be able to really enforce its goals and truly be a power that Europe had to reckon with. Bismarck's reforms and militaristic movements allowed Germany to expand and truly become Germany. By unifying all these German states and by taking land from France, he established what we know today as the Second German Reich, or the first true German Empire. It was formed officially in 1871, and that happened when Wilhelm I, who was king of Prussia, is now coronated as Kaiser of the Second Reich. You can see that happening in the picture here. He would be crowned by Bismarck himself. This is actually happening in France's Versailles Hall of Mirrors, which is kind of a in-your-face flex against the French, who Germans and French have not gone along for a long time. And that goes all the way back to the coronation of Charlemagne, who originally ruled what was now Germany and France. And the Frankish Empire, the first Holy Roman Empire, ruled both of these people. And after Charlemagne died, there was a dispute about who should take over. And since then, there's been an independent France. And then there was the Holy Roman Empire, which ruled what is now modern Germany, even though it wasn't actually German, but they spoke German. It's a whole thing. It's confusing. But these two haven't liked each other for a long time. Now, the reason I bring up Charlemagne is that in a lot of ways, Kaiser Wilhelm I is another Charlemagne. He has united the same territory that Charlemagne did. And much like Charlemagne, it was kind of believed that he had divine right, that he was chosen by God. And in the same way, he's a continuation not only of what he believed to be Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire, but also the Roman Empire itself. It's a theme that we've seen throughout world history. Much recently, we saw this with Napoleon and France, and it shows how closely tied France and Germany have been, and that there is a lot of animosity because you have all of these individuals who claim that they are Caesar or God's inherent ruler and a continuation of the once great Roman Empire. Regardless of all of that, Wilhelm has a lot of success early on, but most of that is actually because he hired the right guy. A lot of times rulers gain their power based on the people that they put in power. In this case, Otto von Bismarck, as prime minister, allows Germany to become Germany and become a player on the world stage. It's for this reason that we consider him to be the Iron Chancellor, meaning he ruled with an iron fist. He was tough, he was strong, and with that, he made Germany the same way. One of those reasons, again, is his reference to iron as in industrialism and embracing the factory models and systems that we see going on in Britain and the United States. Germany very quickly becomes an industrial power in Europe and has the technology necessary to be one of the leaders. Again, we mentioned the aspect of blood, the military buildup, having one of the world's largest militaries that couldn't really be trifled with because of how successful it was. And they proved that with the invasion of Austria and the destruction of France in the Franco-Prussian War. Otto von Bismarck also recognized that one of his major enemies was the church, which had for a long time been in power, not only in Germany, but in most of Europe. Remember, the Pope claimed supreme authority over all rulers, and that was definitely true for Germany, an inheritor of the Holy Roman Empire. This idea of culture comp for counterculture, the battle for civilization, was what Bismarck believed was going on between the church and Germany. And it's during his reign that Germany now shifts from a very church-based state to now being a more secular state, thanks to what Otto von Bismarck did. And overall, Germany is now considered to be truly a world power. However, Wilhelm I will die and his son Wilhelm II will take over. And Wilhelm II had some loftier ideas than his father did about what Germany could be. In fact, he believed that Germany should rule all of Europe. And in a very tyrannical, power-hungry move, he actually fires Otto von Bismarck and gains all of that power to himself. And we're going to see that Kaiser Wilhelm II is much more violent and much more antagonistic to the rest of Europe and has this desire to expand worldwide into Europe. But that's a story for another day. Germany isn't the only one who just keeps swimming. It's also happened in Italy as well, who will use nationalism to unite into a new state. There was no such thing as Italy until about 1870, and that started with Victor Emmanuel II, who was the king of a kingdom called Piedmont. Now, much like in Germany, there were a bunch of states that spoke Italian, and typically these had been either possessions of France, the Holy Roman Empire, or of the church. But Victor Emmanuel believed that all these states who spoke Italian should rule themselves. And much like Wilhelm in Prussia, he had a guy behind the guy. In this case, it's an individual named Camillo Cavour, who believed in very realistic politics and bringing people together through militaristic growth. Now, in order to make that happen, they had to find a way to unite all of Italy together. And that was through an individual named Giuseppe Garibaldi, who led a military group called the Red Shirts. And this group was very patriotic and very much for Italy, in fact, for what used to be the Roman Empire. And together, these three will unite Italy under one Italian state. And suddenly now we have not only Germany, but we also have Italy, two states that have come together and created new world power status because of their use of nationalism. Let's bounce back to Russia. Remember, after the Crimean War, Russia has been left completely humiliated, and it shows that they're actually behind the rest of the world. They didn't have the industrial technology that Great Britain had, and that's why they lost the Crimean War. In fact, Russia still is stuck in feudalism, that old style that we talk so much about in the middle of the year. Russia's still doing that. And because of that, they've fallen really far behind the rest of the world. So some people are going to take some steps to make changes, to make Russia a bigger power. Again, nationalism, the interests of your country are important than everything else. Tsar Alexander I was one of these who tried to do that. Remember, he's one of them who hosted the Congress of Vienna and really believed in restricting Napoleon's power. His son, Tsar Alexander II, is going to move forward with ending serfdom and other parts of feudalism, trying to make Russia a little bit more modern. But unfortunately for him, before Russia could really take the step into becoming the next modern power and becoming like a Germany or like an Italy, he was assassinated by a car bomb. And that sort of ended Russia's hopes of moving towards this new industrial type of power. And in fact, the individual who takes over for him, Tsar Nicholas II, is very traditional in the way that he rules. He liked the old style that the Romanovs had always had, this idea of royalty and of czaric power. He wanted that to remain within his grasp. And during his reign, Russia definitely goes back to an absolute style of rule, something that is disappearing because of the Enlightenment, because of the Industrial Revolution and nationalism in Europe. In fact, there were individuals who tried to protest this, and Tsar Nicholas had many of them executed in a violent event known as Bloody Sunday that happened right outside the Winter Palace in Russia.
And finally, because of this, he's actually forced by the people to summon the Duma. This is Russia's version of a Congress, and it exists to check the Tsar's power, something a Tsar had never really had before, but it had been started by Alexander II to take steps to be one of these new enlightened governments. Tsar Nicholas doesn't like this, and as you can see, there are tensions in Russia amongst what Russia's identity should be as it begins to flirt with this national idea. And as nationalism takes hold, we will see some major changes in Russia. But again, that's a story for another day.
Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Yeah, that whole idea, while it may be part of a lovable kids movie and a movie that may have been a part of your childhood, it actually gives us a wonderful look at nationalism, because truly when you think about it, humans and groups of people are kind of like fish and schools of fish. We're constantly trying to swim, and we're constantly trying to find ways to survive and find what makes us more likely to survive than others. That's what we just saw with countries like Germany and Italy and Russia. Everyone is fighting to swim and continue to swim, and it's turning into this competition in which we're trying to find out what country is going to be able to swim the longest, what country is going to be able to swim the farthest. And every country thinks that they should be the ones to do it because of the Enlightenment, because of these ideas that are all about us, right? Nationalism holds that my country is better than yours because it's all about me. As these take hold, the competition is only going to become more and more fierce, and we're starting to see more and more tensions throughout the world as nationalism takes hold. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.